question of logic. warp speed towards the continuation of our mission. To truthfully go where no news will have been going before.
Engage impulse engines. Engage. Engage.
Engage.
Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage.
Engage.
Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage. Captain.
Engage emergency override.
Engage. 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 Engage forward shields 35%. Engage.
Engage the cloaking device.
Engage.
Of them. Engage them in conversation.
Engage. Engage.
Marwa Osman explains Zionism with Vanessa Beeley. Watch this space.
Then to retaliate, that makes that decision, and we don't have a president. And if we don't have a president, it should be the entire cabinet, the government, that should make that decision. But apparently they just got together, and they happen to be both Muslims. So our friendly Christians in the nation were very much, and rightfully, if I may, not happy.
Or the rate of about 3-4 years ago, he was earning $2,000 a month. He's now earning $120 a month because he stayed in Lebanese town. Good reason that it came to Damascus to seek cooperation.
About Smotrich and Ben Gvir. With a new set of results. So the elections over certain issues, therefore, half the term was now the head leader of Prime Minister because he lost in the Zionist entity of protest. No, it started way before that. We are entering on week 16 of protests. So it's been months of protests, but they have been increasing dramatically over the past couple of weeks. But the issue is, let's just remind people what happened in the Zionist entity last year when there was an election, and actually there were two elections, and the third one had Netanyahu as prime minister because he lost in the second elections. That was in the first elections that happened, he lost. There was an opposition. There was Yair Lapid, and who is now the head leader of the opposition, that was prime minister, along with also Benny Gantz. They both interchanged prime minister for half the term each. And then after that, there was an election where Netanyahu lost. But then they repeated the elections over certain issues that are depending on the number of votes and a lot of issues, because Netanyahu didn't like the results. So they repeated the elections. But when they repeated the elections, Netanyahu was had a coalition with a new set of extremists, because according to me, they are all extremists, but a new set of extremists that are way far more deadly and irrational than the current extremists, which were head by Yair Lapid. And we're talking about Smotrich and Ben Gvir. And these people, Ben Gvir was actually placed in jail because of extremism, because he attempted to kill an Israeli persona because of his views on the political issues inside of Israel. But the issue is farther than that, because when that coalition happened, it means that Netanyahu had to sell them something, give them something in order for them to give him votes. Added to that, some of the left that actually liked Netanyahu also voted for him. So when the cabinet was formed, formed, and the alliance was formed, and the Knesset started convening to take to vote over laws and whatnot. The left that voted for Netanyahu realized that there are things happening that are being said and that are being done that they don't approve of. So they joined the already protests that were happening with the led by Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz, who are the opposition in the Zionist entity or considered the left. But again, when I say left and right, please, they are all right for me. I am a Levantine, a Lebanese Southern woman. They are all left. They are all colonizers. They all should leave. But I'm just explaining what's going on.
Yeah.
So when that happened, and they just backed off from supporting Netanyahu, and they joined the protests. The issue that brought more people to the streets in the occupied Palestinian territories in Jaffa, Tel Aviv, was a proposal by Netanyahu's government that would allow a majority, I think like a 61 majority of the 120 seats inside the Knesset, to basically just override almost any Supreme Court ruling in the entity. And that would also allow politicians to appoint the justices, the judges, to the bench. So you can just imagine what can happen. And that was proposed by people like, for example, Yariv Levin, who is the justice minister in the entity, and by a religious Zionist a La La Land man named Rothman. They both chair Knesset, the Knesset Law and Justice Committee, which is why they proposed this law. And it was spearheaded by Netanyahu, and it was obviously loved by Netanyahu because there are a lot of corruption cases against Netanyahu and his entire family, even his wife. So Netanyahu would love to see the Supreme Court go, so he wouldn't go to jail the same way that Olmert went to jail, and this way he would help and appoint the judges that he would trust for them not to put him in jail. So both men who proposed this, they already had great hatred for the Supreme Court inside the Israeli entity, because it was that Supreme Court that it was actually that took the decision back in 2005 to withdraw from the Gaza Strip, to get out of the Gaza Strip. So it was because the Mizrahi population, which is basically the Jews that originate from the region of West Asia, whom the Supreme Court is usually, according to what they say, the Mizrahis say, the Supreme Court is usually biased against them. So these people did not want to leave Gaza. They wanted to stay there, and they want to keep killing the Palestinian people. So they already have a bad experience with, from their position, with the Supreme Court inside of the Israeli entity, which is a civil court. It's not a religious court. And what these two people want, what Rothman and also Levine want, they want for the Zionists who are ultra religious to take control of the Supreme Court, of the judicial system in general inside the Zionist entity. So I mean, let's put it into perspective. Everyone that saw this happening, they were sure that these measures would help Netanyahu evade any sort of prosecution in all of his corruption cases, and it will just deny all they would drop the charges. They wouldn't even go to court. And add to that, which basically, if you remember Netanyahu's trial cases, they triggered more than 3 years, I think 3 or 4 years of political crisis inside of the entity, and there was a split inside of the entity that began. The real split began then. That led into the failure of the first and the second elections for Netanyahu. And within the power of the Supreme Court as well, because the people in the Supreme Court who are, by the way, part of the political left of the opposition inside of Israel, they were talking against the full annexation of the occupied West Bank, which the right want to do it. They want to kill as much as they want of the Palestinian natives and drive them out of the West Bank and build illegal colonial settlers there. But the left wanted to just cut the cost and stop anything that's coming from the West Bank, because over the past 3 years the West Bank has had a completely new maneuver in how to resist the occupation by adopting a full-fledged armed resistance that we had not seen since 2002. So the left wanted to end this politically, but the right wanted to go all in and just kill as much as possible. Also, religiously speaking, the left is pro-LGBTQ legislation. They want to make it legal for same-sex people to get married inside of the entity, and that's a huge, big no for the religious Zionists. And they were trying to put some laws to protect women's rights, because what people don't know is that women have no rights in the far extreme Jewish religion. They keep, it's funny that people talk about Islamophobia, despite the fact that it's absolutely nonsense. As a free Muslim, you know how free I am. I don't need to tell you. But they don't know that the far right extreme Zionist project is against women's rights, so and minority rights. Because if you haven't seen the video of one of the protesters getting his behind beaten so bad because he dared wave a Palestinian flag because he wants to help solve this issue politically, he was beaten up by the people who were protesting with him, not only the people protesting against him.
Yeah.
So it's a big controversial issue inside of the entity. So all of that amounted into what we saw. I think according to Khan TV, it was 750,000 people in the streets, colonial settlers in the streets of Jaffa, occupied Tel Aviv, in Palestine. And that's something that has never been seen. It's unprecedented in the history of this occupation entity. And that not only affected people, not only affected universities that are right now, they are on full strike. They not only affected council members who are now on a hunger strike. I think they stopped the hunger strike after Netanyahu said that he's backing down from from these reforms. I'll talk about it later. But not only that, it's also at the level of the army, the occupation forces. You have army pilots who refused to fly Netanyahu anywhere. You have army personnel, generals, who refuse to go back to their posts because they don't approve of the reforms that Netanyahu and his cult want to impose on the occupation settlers. And you have conflicting struggle inside of the army itself, which is basically the only backbone holding what is known as Israel together. Which is why that specific thing that happened right after Netanyahu dismissed the war minister of the entity. I don't want to say the wrong name, but I think his name is Yoav, if I'm not mistaken. But after he dismissed him, the people went out of their mind. The army just said, no, we are not going to take this. We had military reservists saying that we're not coming back. You had many allies of the Israeli entity itself across the world express alarm. I mean, the US, for the love of God, expressed concern over the direction in which the entity was heading. And you had their president, Isaac Herzog, saying time and again that if the house gets burned, it's going to fall on everyone's head. And after the dismissal of Yoav Gallant, his name is Gallant, Yoav Gallant, what they call the defense minister, what I call, and everyone who's sane calls the war minister, that appears to have changed the entire equation. Netanyahu fired Gallant over his opposition to the proposal. It sparked one of the most dramatic nights in Israeli history. You can see it in the thread that I started. It was so nice for me to write that. I was waiting for that for weeks, but it was every second there was a new thing coming up, and it was crazy. And although the media reported that Netanyahu will be willing to cut a deal, but he appeared to be basically a hostage in the hands, and it's because of him. He made that. He put himself in that position. He became, the media is now portraying Netanyahu as a hostage in the hands of the far right partners in his coalition, and they think that would actually bring down the government. But and yet Netanyahu, instead of basically backing off and saying, okay, I'm going to stop the reforms, he said, I am now pausing the reforms. I'm going to wait till the new term of the Knesset. This term, until this term ends, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to wait till the upcoming term. That was unacceptable by both sides. His coalition said, no, we're not going to pause it. We're going to continue with it. And the people on the ground said, no, we don't believe you. And we don't want it to be paused. We want it to end right here and now. So no one trusts him from both sides right now. And other members of his coalition, they have just reiterated, they have emphasized their determination to pass the most important parts of this legislation before the Knesset breaks up by the Jewish Passover holiday, which is supposed to be on April 2nd, which is supposed to be next week. So we're going to see another week of craziness inside of the Zionist entity. And I've been told by Palestinian friends in the occupied 48 territories that they are afraid of one thing. They are very much glad that this is happening, because this shows the world what kind of crazy people are running the show in the Zionist entity, and how they are always, whether they are protesting or not, because over the past days, the number of people killed by the Zionist entity in the occupied West Bank increased. Even during that, they were still killing Palestinian people. But their main concern was that they know for sure that now the only option for Netanyahu would be to try to externalize the crisis, either starting something with the West Bank, or moving forward and starting something with Gaza, or even worse, picking on Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, look, if the latter happens, it would be the highlight of my life, because that would be spelling the end of the Zionist entity. But I'm so concerned and afraid that he will be forcing the army to externalize the problem into the Gaza Strip, the biggest open prison on earth. And the Palestinians are sick and tired, and we are sick and tired of watching them die without being able to do anything for them. So he might try to do this, but I don't know if it's going to work out. I don't know if some of the army members who disapprove of him will follow suit. But when it's about the Palestinians, all the Zionists are far-right extremists. I don't know if I've covered everything, but
and watch this space. Remember, your engagement through a like, share, or sub will accelerate us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission. Truthfully go where no news will have been going before. Here's AL24 on the Zionist entity.
Volume about the so-called Israel democracy. It speaks also volume about the kind of system, this colonial system that this entity has established over the years. And now these are perhaps a sign of a crumbling of the system. It is a long ways, but it certainly shows a strong indication that not all is well, that when we talk about democracy in Israel, we're actually talking about some specific people. There are the Israeli state segregates along racial lines. For example, if you're an Ashkenazi Jewish, you are citizen number one, and then underneath you is a Sephardist, and then the Arabs or the Palestinians.
We have the evidence. No one can dispute the evidence. We heard the evidence. We saw the evidence.
Inside, to the Algerians, this is typical. It's a colonial system that we lived for so many years under colonialization. Sure. This is the same thing. Along with that, it speaks also volume of the extent to which we are now talking about problems within Israeli society, within this entity. And for a while, the state was, just as an example, until mid-90s, the perception among the old generation, the Israeli Zion and Ishaq Rabin and so on and so forth. They believed that to get peace and stability and is to be recognized by the Arab world. Well, that philosophy in '96 changed when the Israelis shifted the focus of the peace process from land for peace to security for peace. And at that point, Israel started to build an arsenal of military, as always. I mean, you had the dome, the wall. This is all to give a sense of security
What is this nothing you
for
talk
the
about?
Jewish states. And then you have this. This is an internal problem that says that those security measures are not enough to keep these colonial states in a Palestinian land and discriminating the Palestinians.
And how do you read the delay of the judicial overhaul plan here? Is it just a move to, let's say, ease the anger of the people?
It is the anger of the people, but historically, if you look at, as an example, when Ehud Barak ran for elections the second time, I believe, he failed because he ran, or he was talking about, or in his campaign about putting some restrictions on some of the privileges that the Orthodox Jews were getting. The Orthodox Jews don't work. They are there to pray and to meditate, to protect the religion. This is what they believe, and the idea, and they were supported by the states. The Ehud Barak raised the issue of restricting those privileges. He was met with a strong reaction, and as a result, one of the variables that led to his failure in that elections against Ariel Sharon was his inclusion in his campaign, the discussion of the privilege that the Orthodox Jews. This is a similar when he started addressing issues that pertain to issues of identity, of a certain privilege, you tend to get this kind of reaction. Netanyahu, by what really at the end was to save himself from the court, because he is under investigation, or was under investigation. So curbing the power of the legislators was a way of doing that. The other thing that you have to consider is that the court, to a large degree, in this entity has ruled in favor of what some may call the Palestinians, the Arab Palestinian, particularly when it comes to expropriation of land, and in particular, when the far right is now talking about let's get rid of the Palestinians from this land, they don't exist. They call them all sort of name. This would require a legislation, and certainly what the far right was thinking is if we go that path, the court might stop us from doing just that. The point is this: so there is some personal in this that pertains to Netanyahu. There is also the fundamental issue of the Palestinians being given the right, another tool to exploit the Palestinians, and some sees it as an infringement on the powers of the court. So it's been for months, as you know, for weeks, this demonstrations. It hasn't gotten to this level, but we are seeing it grow, and even though the Prime Minister has retracted, the demonstration seems to continue.
Very nice. And is it an exaggeration, Dr. Hamoud Sarhi, to say that there are possible signs of disintegration of the entity here?
You know, this entity is based on contradictions. You have identity contradictions, where identities are
Your
classified
inconsistencies are glaringly obvious.
according by how European, if you want to say, are. So the Ashkenazis are on the top. They have all the privileges. You have the Sephardis of Northern Africa, of African, Ethiopian, other places, origins are less viewed less and less. So you have the contradiction. You have this contradiction. The second contradiction is the social disparities, the economic conditions, the inequalities among this entity's social structure, and that's also play a major role. And the other thing, that one factor that we seem to ignore, the Israeli population has grown and has changed its dynamic since the collapse of the former Soviet Union. Up to 1988, the population was somehow, in a sense, cohesive, even though there are so many contradictions coming from a different. This is a population that comes, that comes under the premise of the right of return. So you come to Palestine, you're given a land, you get given a monthly payment, you're rewarded, and you're given sort of money to settle in, to do all of that. So that population is a fabricated population that comes from a different segment and different part of life. But up to 1988, there was a belief that population, for example, was leaning toward the perception that if we can coexist with the Palestinians, if we can coexist with the Arabs, we can live in peace. But then you have the wave of Jews from the former Soviet Union, and suddenly you had about 800,000 people, Jewish, coming from the former Soviet Union. The dynamic, and these Jews were told, this is your land, and at that moment you start to see an extremism leaning towards yeah, exactly. So the far right can be described in that context. The Israelis have adapted to international pressure, and this is the first time, which might be different because you have an internal pressure. So for the international pressure, one of the things that the Israelis learned from their war in 1967, where they were sort of criticized internationally, and they became sort of a villain in the eye of international law. And what the Israelis did after that is start to think of wars as unlimited wars. So have we seen attacks in Lebanon, on the southern Lebanon, as you have this limited wars in Gaza against the Palestinians, and the attacks on the West Bank, using the settlements to achieve Israeli goal of taking all over the Palestinians' land. This latest far right movement is on record believing that that the Palestinians have no presence in this land and this part, and they should take the lands of all the Palestinians. They should kick them out, and Palestinians have no rights. That is so you have all of these ideas that the Israelis are always worried about the external perceptions, because their survival depends on this idea that they are a democracy, which, as we've seen, was never a democracy. Just ask any Palestinian, ask the entire world community that sees Israel as a state that is in constant violation of human rights, and so on and so forth. So there's a clear example of that. I think where this is going is that there is certainly a problem with the Israeli internal system, internal structure. The Israelis will have to look into this, whether this is a Netanyahu problem. Because remember, it's Netanyahu that has pushed for this judicial reforms. And he pushed for the judicial reforms because of his personal problems. Meaning that if he's able to nominate the judges that he wants, or the Knesset is able to nominate the judges, then he is free from any repercussions, or he will try to to use his ways to get away with the violation of the laws that he's allegedly been been under. So you have these internal forces that this is the new thing. So how Israel will emerge on that, it depends on how the internal forces will come together. Ishaq Rabin used to say when he in the Knesset during his time, he had only a slim majority of one vote or a little bit less or more, and he said the Israeli state was always on collapse. But because they are on the verge of constantly of a fear of losing, they maintain their solidarity. So there is a lesson to learn. But also a lesson to learn from here is the fact that this is new. This is not sort of something that Israel have lived. But more than anything else, when you put it in the context of Israeli security, this is the first time when Israel is being hit from inside, and it's exposed the inequalities and the disparities and the problems on which this Zionist colonial state has been created. And eventually, like any colonial states, the end is there, if not sooner, it's later.
Beam me up, Mr. Spark. Beam me up. Lock on transporters. Beam us up. Beam us up. Quickly. Beam us up home. Beam us up.
Prepare to beam us up, Mr. Scott. Beam us up, Mr. Scott.
Prepare to beam us up. Scott, prepare to beam us up. Have Scotty beam us up. Beam us up. Beam us up. Scotty, beam us up fast.
Stand by to beam us up.
Scotty, beam me up.
Beam me up. Beam us up now!
Stand by to beam us up.
No need to beam me up, sir. The situation is under control.